As you could probably tell by now, Juno is very strong. Juno does have weaknesses, such as struggling to peel for other support, but teams were able to find solutions to this problem. The two most common backlines used are Juno plus Ana and Juno plus Brig. Each addresses Juno's weaknesses in a very different way. Ana Juno is often played alongside D.Va, sometimes Ramattra. The composition plays very fast and always wants to set the pace. Although Ana is vulnerable, Juno makes up for it by enabling her frontline to play as aggressive as possible. This approach has become popular on maps such as Circuit Royale due to the long sightlines involved. The farther away the Ana can play, the better. I covered this composition in my last video, so check that out if you're interested in learning more. There's a quick note I want to add on to this. This composition, Ana Juno, has become much less popular, especially the D.Va variant. As of the most recent patch, Juno can no longer turn D.Va into an ICBM, and D.Va has also received a considerable nerf. This next backline is the new best Juno backline and has absolutely taken over, especially after the D.Va nerfs. Brig plus Juno. This backline is usually played with Ramattra. This composition is also fast, but it has a more balanced approach. Brig alongside Juno makes a lot of sense. The Brig can keep herself alive and doesn't need as much help, which is a quick fix to Juno's primary weakness. This is the composition we will be covering today, and it has become the go-to backline for professional teams. Brig has traditionally been used in dive compositions and slow compositions. She provides a level of protection from flankers and dive heroes, and she permits these compositions to take brawls in the midfight under the right circumstances. Brig is good in enabling midfight brawls, yet she hasn't typically been used in brawl compositions until now. Why? The problem was that previously, a brawl composition required a Lucio to function. Speed was, and still is, necessary, so your backline would have to consist of a Brig and Lucio, which isn't very good. There was one composition that utilized this backline, Jotes, but beyond that, this backline is simply outclassed by Bap Lucio or Kira Lucio. This has to do with the lack of burst healing and utility. Lucio and Brig both excel at similar things such as peeling and booping, so this overlap in utility decreases the usefulness. It's better to take Immortality or Suzu, as well as the increased damage output that popular flex support choices can provide. Now, things are a little different. Juno has that necessary speed CD and also has decent healing output and burst healing potential with the torpedoes. In exchange though, Juno isn't great at peeling for her other support and lacks that kind of utility that Lucio does have. This is where Brig comes in. She fills those gaps that are left behind. She can peel, she can boop, and she can provide additional support to her DPS in the form of packs. This whole explanation is admittedly a major oversimplification, so we will be looking at some fights from OWCS Korea Grand Finals and looking closer at how this new meta composition functions. Zeta Division and Team Falcons are even 1-1, but here on Runasapi, Falcons completely shift the momentum of this match. Both teams are running the newest and most widely utilized variant of the Brig Juno composition with Ramattra, Mei, and Ashe. Hanbin decides to take the initiative in this first neutral, advancing with shield and throwing down a very aggressive slow, while Zeta just kited out. Bernard does his best to hold on to his cooldowns until after Hanbin's are over, but in doing so allows proper 2 quick headshots which brought him to half HP. Hanbin holds off as long as he can, but is quickly forced to use his form as Zeta continues to advance. Bernard uses his form second, so Zeta will have the advantage for a short moment. Hanbin understands this and kites as quickly as he can. The first mistake here comes from the side of Falcons. Fielder plays forward, which allows Bernard to land a few punches, and that's all Zeta needed. As Fielder attempts to escape with the bash, Alpha Yi jumps behind him to block the escape, catching Fielder by surprise. After this first pick, the goal is simply to survive for Zeta. Alpha Yi uses a defensive wall to help Bernard escape, and Zeta are able to successfully stabilize the fight in their favor. Fielder isn't back just yet, so Falcons take things slow. Instead of forcing their way through the choke, Falcons send proper out wide. This move actually creates some space for Hanbin, and forces Zeta to give up their positioning through mid. All of a sudden, Zeta Division are fighting an uphill battle. Finn, in response, uses Orbital Ray, forcing Hanbin into annihilation. He needs to buy enough time for Chio to throw down his own, which comes through a few seconds later. Next, Stalker throws out his freeze, he got it 10% earlier than Alpha Yi. The goal of this freeze was to split Bernard from the rest of Zeta, and the plan works perfectly. Although Alpha Yi takes Stalker out of the fight and Zeta have a numbers advantage, Falcons have a clear upper hand. It's Hanbin's turn now, and he doesn't need the block anymore, so he starts punching within the orbital, quickly eliminating a frozen Bernard. After that, it's just cleanup. Hanbin rolls through the rest of Zeta Division, who are unable to fight back, and secures himself a 4K in this first fight. Fielder also returned near the end of that fight, now having built the rally. This next fight is super interesting, so pay close attention. Hanbin starts close in the left from an angle, while Proper is playing through main. The concept that Falcons have mastered with this composition is angles. They are very good at setting up angles in different scenarios, and this is just one example. Hanbin is the bait, and Zeta fall for it. Violet attempts to chase Hanbin down and even commits the rally, but in a spectacular display of teamwork, Stalker walls Zeta off from Hanbin, allowing him to escape, and then Chio uses the ring to slingshot Hanbin right back into the fight alongside Proper's Bob. Falcons used Hanbin as bait, bailed him out, and then sent him right back in. While this was happening, Falcon's ultimates were perfectly timed to stall the advance from Zeta. Alfie still has something up his sleeve though, Blizzard, one of the most effective defensive ultimates in this composition. Blizzard in this matchup is great for punishing Ramatra, as we saw from the first fight, and it is also very good for dealing with Brigitte. It's an effective way to stop both Annihilation and Rally, so teams will use Blizzard as a countermeasure to those ultimates in particular. Unfortunately for Zeta though, Alfie doesn't get the placement right. His critical error was underestimating how committed Falcons were to their advance. Alfie overshot the Blizzard completely, which allowed immunity inside of the room. Hanbin doesn't get frozen here because the actual center of the Blizzard is required to have line of sight of its target to freeze. Proper's able to make things even worse for Zeta. He wraps around while Hanbin and Fielder advance, taking a flank angle that catches Finn and Flora completely off guard. This fight doesn't match much longer, and it's just another game of cleanup. Something interesting to note is that Falcons committed everything to that play. If Alpha U were able to land the freeze, allowing Zeta to kite, it is very possible that Zeta could have then made a powerful re-engage with Bob and Annihilation. Falcons had to win in that moment. Those few seconds were decisive. Falcons obtain the checkpoint, but they have a problem now. They need ultimates. Ult rotation is especially decisive in this mirror, so Falcons' #1 priority is farming as fast as they can. Until they get those ultimates, there's only one thing Falcons can do: run. Zeta advance, and, as expected, Falcons kite as quickly as they can. Flora used the Bob, but Falcons played this exceptionally well and were able to entirely disengage. They might not have ultimates just yet, but they do have one trick up their sleeve because Proper has gone missing. Flora turns around to realize that Proper had snuck behind onto the high ground. At the same moment, Hanbin throws a perfect slow right onto Flora, and Proper just lands the headshot. This particular moment might not have been planned, but it definitely made an impact. This fight's momentum has completely shifted. Finn uses Orbital while Bernard uses Annihilation. If Zeta don't trade out here, they will lose this fight as well. Proper advances, so Zeta ends up sandwiched between angles. Chio also uses his own Orbital a little later, finally having built it, so Falcons now have the advantage of pressure. Alfie is sent back to deal with Proper and does manage to do so, but the fight has already been decided. Hanbin walks through Violet and then pops Annihilation. In a bit of an overkill show of force, Stalker also uses the Blizzard. Not sure why Falcons committed both Blizzard and Annihilation at the end. I would assume this was a bit of a misread of the fight. In-game, 4 minutes have passed, and Falcons have traveled 75 meters. Neither team has ultimates to start this fight. I don't know how to explain this fight other than Proper did a thing. Falcons again decide to set up with angles, with Proper playing solo from the left side. The idea was likely for Proper to build Bob, and then Falcons could engage, and Proper would retain the space to work off of. This position is just too aggressive to play off of normally, and wouldn't work if Falcons did not intend on taking a fight first with ultimates. Long story short, Bob wasn't actually needed. Proper just picks up kill into Finn, then Flora right after. Proper is just a freak of nature in this meta, and I don't think anybody can stop him. Zeta Division are able to run him down on his aggressive angle before he gets Bob, but it simply doesn't matter. Both Brigitte's commit rally, Alfie throws down Blizzard, but Falcons have the numbers advantage. Brigs are traded out due to Alfie's Blizzard and Stalker's Wall, and then Hanbin cleans up the rest. Falcons continue to push forward into final fight territory. This last fight is pretty weird. Violet swaps over to Alari, potentially in a panic swap, while Fielder goes over to Kiriko, likely to get back to the fight faster. Kiriko Juno is an actual popular Juno variation, so this makes more sense than Alari. Anyways, time for one more clever play from Proper. Falcons do something surprising. They start to retreat, even though they have ultimates. Zeta chase, and they're looking to use their own orbital, but that was all Falcons wanted. Their plan can be put into action. While Falcons were kiting, Proper was wrapping around on yet another flank. The idea is to throw the Bob out from this flank, and this would be the trigger for the rest of Falcons to switch gears and run straight back into Zeta with Chio's orbital. The plan works, and it works very well. Flora was able to take Proper out, but the Bob had been deployed and the damage had been done. Proper didn't expect to live, he didn't need to for this plan to work. Falcons realize they're near the finish line. They want to keep the pressure up and use their ultimates first to make the touch as difficult as possible for Zeta. Hanbin walks the whole way into Zeta's spawn, chasing Flora, preventing him from using his Bob. Bernard tries to hold on to the cart, but Stalker has Blizzard, and if Annihilation is rock, Blizzard is paper, and there's absolutely nothing that Bernard can do. Flora won't be able to get back with Bob in time, so this map is already over.
문보라 이거 어떻게 살아요? 어떻게 살아요? 베르나르까지 보내버리면 베르나 못 살아 이거! 오! 야, 지금 바이올렛 선수가 사이드 컨트롤 내가 해보겠다는 생각한 것 같은데 필더가 바로 킹
설마 2점? 정말 2점? 2점까지 들어가는 팔콘입니다! 아 이게
Now we move on to King's Row, with the match 2-1. I discussed this in my previous Juno video, but essentially King's Row first point is one of the most difficult sections of any map to defend in this meta. This is because setting up through the high ground is difficult, forcing the defending team to play primarily on the ground. This makes it easy for the opposing team to utilize that space and control it, especially during the first fight where no ultimates are available. Positioning matters a lot in neutral fights, fights where ultimates aren't on the field. Most teams falter during this first fight on defense, but Team Falcons didn't, and it all has to do with this genius play from Hanbin. Falcons' setup for this first fight is interesting. Rather than just starting on the low ground, they all position up on high ground. Now, this setup is interesting because Falcons don't actually intend on staying on the high ground unless a certain condition is met. This setup is only a preventative measure. Falcons realized that a relatively easy way to approach this first point would be to run a dive composition and secure the high ground very early on, leaving Falcons in an awkward position. So what Falcons have done is they've set themselves up on top of this valuable position just in case Zeta were to run such a dive composition, so that they could play their first fight by holding onto the high ground in a bunker-like strategy. Of course, this wasn't the case, and Zeta Division were mirroring Falcons' Brawl, so as Zeta slowly advanced, Falcons drop down to meet Zeta around the statue. A detail like this might not have been very relevant to this match, but it is interesting to examine. Yes, I am inferring Falcon's thought process, but also this idea of starting on the high ground as a Brawl composition in case of a dive has actually been around since Overwatch 1, and has only become more prevalent in Overwatch 2, since Brawl compositions have less control over high ground positions without a diva, making them weaker to dive on maps such as King's Row. Like I said before, Falcons drop since hard holding the high ground against a Brawl composition would only result in lost space. Proper does make his way back up to the high ground after a moment, as he is the only player on Falcons who will benefit from holding the position during the mid-fight. Zeta Division continue to push Falcons back. Flora applies pressure through the hotel, and Hanbin holds down his forward position until his form is forced, and then he makes an interesting decision. Most Ramacha players would kite towards the archway, which is also where the support will kite. You can see both Fielder and Chio are in this position, but Hanbin kites a different direction, left into the high ground section of the map. Zeta now believe they have full map control, and they continue to push Falcons back. Under normal circumstances, if Hanbin were with his backline, Falcons would have lost all of their map control and positioning. This is why this point is so difficult to defend in this meta. This happens relatively quickly, and it's easy for the attackers to push the defender into this dilemma, but this time it's different. Hanbin grabs the Mega from inside and walks up the stairs, running out onto Flora with Form. This allows for an easy opening pick and also provides an opportunity for Falcons to counterattack and retake the space that they lost. Proper takes an angle from the high ground solo, while the backline of Falcons push forward and cause chaos in Zeta's frontline. In a matter of seconds, this fight had completely fallen apart for Zeta Division, even though they seemed in full control. This move from Hanbin is so genius because it prevented Zeta from being able to place a chokehold on Falcons at the archway, and it also prevented Flora from controlling the high ground angle. If Hanbin hadn't hit this flank with the timing he did, it wouldn't have been possible for Proper to go uncontested on the high ground, or for the backline of Falcons to re-engage. This goes back to the idea that angles are key in this meta, and most often we've seen Ashe in an angle, but in this case, Falcons used Hanbin on Ramatra to re-engage from a very hard angle to secure this fight. It's a slightly extreme but effective approach to solving the problem of first point's neutral defensive fight. After this fight, Proper lands an early pick onto Violet, which is also extremely valuable for Team Falcons. Yes, it burns some time off the clock until Zeta can re-engage, but it also allows Falcons to make further progress towards building ultimates. When Zeta finally has a chance to re-engage, Chio has built the orbital ray, and this will matter for how Falcons plan to take this next fight. Hanbin does something very interesting once again. As Zeta engage and Finn throws down his orbital ray, Hanbin remains in an extremely aggressive position and kites the opposite direction of Zeta's orbital ray, and this forces Zeta to make a decision. You could either try to secure the kill on Hanbin, or you can follow the orbital and go after Falcon's core. Falcons could force a decision like this by keeping Hanbin forward, but they also needed something to back that plan up, and this is where Chio throws down his own orbital. Now Zeta, who are split between Hanbin and their own orbital, are in an awkward losing position. It took too long to finish Hanbin, and now Chio's orbital has rendered Finn's orbital practically useless. Falcons can easily roll right through Zeta division, taking their second fight on first point. Next fight is interesting. Both teams have nearly identical ultimate banks, only lacking orbital ray. Things start out with a trade of bobs. Flora throws his and Proper throws his own right back. Both teams burn the opposing bob and the fight is still a stalemate. Now, both teams are playing around the corner waiting for an opportunity to hit a blizzard. Zeta make the decisive move this time with Alpha Yi landing a perfect wall onto Hanbin. Violet rallies and Zeta are able to eliminate Hanbin, which essentially secures the fight. Stalker attempted to turn this fight with a blizzard, but it simply didn't land, so Zeta are finally able to capture the first point. Such an impressive hold leaves Zeta with only 3 minutes and 40 seconds to attack the second point. Typically, due to the difficulty of holding first point, it is easy for the attacking team to roll the first point and then use the large time bank to capture the second as well. But Falcons have burned enough time, and holding second point is now more feasible. The first fight on second point takes place at around the halfway point, with Bernard playing from the Mega Room. Hanbin understands full well that as long as Bernard is holding such an angle, Falcons cannot advance. Hanbin pressures Bernard a little bit, but doesn't turn the corner, instead opting to use his Nemesis form to back off from the corner. Alpha Yi decides to move off of this, walling Hanbin from the rest of Falcons. Finn also uses Orbital Ray to back this up. Hanbin is okay with this though. Similar to the fight on first point where he simply acted as bait, he can do the same here and buy time in his annihilation. Hanbin doesn't throw a singular punch, trusting his team to respond. Proper and Fielder began this fight at an angle, which allowed Proper to build Bob before Flora. This means that Falcons have an ultimate advantage, and Proper was also able to apply pressure from this angle. Chio has Orbital Ray here, but doesn't actually want to use it immediately. He realizes that Hanbin can hold on a bit longer as bait, so it would be best to use his own Orbital Ray a few seconds after Finn, so that Falcon's orbital lasts longer. This plan works out great. Chio waits around 3 to 4 seconds, then deploys his own orbital towards Hanbin. Proper and Fielder also back off of their angle, and Proper throws the Bob to assist Hanbin and also compound on the orbital. Bernard attempts to survive Falcon's orbital the same way with Annihilation, but it was futile since Hanbin was already on top of his backline. Hanbin secures a 3k, swiftly ending this first fight. Okay, so the Hanbin play from earlier was awesome, but now Falcons managed to outdo even that with one of the most unhinged plays in recent Overwatch history. Falcons begin by playing the first choke, but they play farther back rather than holding it close. Zeta probably thought that Falcons were just trying to get some poke off before kiting, but in reality, this is an elaborate bait. While Falcons try to get Zeta to move forward a little past the archway, Proper is hiding up on the high ground, waiting for a call from his team. Once the condition for this play is met, with Zeta moving completely past the archway, Proper drops and Falcons pinch Zeta. Hanbin uses form and advances inside, and Chio throws his torpedoes. Proper lands a perfect dynamite, taking Zeta's backline by surprise, and Hanbin assists in finishing Violet. At the end of this fight, Bernard also survives, allowing Falcons to stagger, bleeding even more time with this incredible fight. Falcons also won this without expending ultimates. They were able to win solely by creating an angle and then using their cooldowns with near perfect timing. Our next fight is another fight of ultimate trades, and Zeta Division have an advantage with 3 ultimates compared to Falcon's 2. Flora starts on a soft angle and initiates with Bob. Stalker responds with Blizzard, and then Alpha Yu uses his own Blizzard to prevent Falcons from advancing. Fielder rallies to try and assist Hanbin after the Blizzard expires, but Falcons are in a weak position and they are far forward, so Violet uses his opportunity to rally, and this brings a close to the fight. Fielder is punished for extending forward to assist Hanbin, and the remainder of Falcons fall like dominoes. This fight win might look good for Zeta on the surface, but in reality they have dug themselves into a bit of a hole. Falcons will have a chance to take one more fight on the second point, so Zeta Division needs to win this next fight. Last fight, Zeta expended 3 ultimates, while Falcons only expended 2 ultimates. This means that going into the next fight, Falcons now have 3 ultimates while Zeta only have 2 ultimates. Even worse for Zeta, due to the small time bank, they will likely have to leave someone on point rather than being able to fully kite Falcons' ultimates. Zeta will be forced to take a head-on fight at a disadvantage, and they cannot try and run away. On paper, Falcons should win this fight, and in reality, Falcons do win this fight. Hanbin holds on to the point as long as he can, and just as Zeta commit their ultimates, Falcon used everything available to them. There's essentially nothing that Zeta can do, and Falcons are able to hold on to the second point.
이러면 이거 베르나르 절멸
절멸 눌렀습니다.
한빈 역전을 오거든요. 역전이네.
경기를 마무리 짓는 역전멸이 왔습니다. 절멸. 그대로 상대팀 모두 다 괴멸시키면서 화물은 여기서 멈추게 만들어 줍니다. 팔콘이 이 정도 거리 정도면 꽤나 만족스러운 그런 위치에 화물.
As you would expect, going into their attack, Falcons held no punches. They took first point during the first fight. They even ran the greedy on a Juno, taking advantage of the fact that Fielder could play a long sightline around the statue, and Zeta could do nothing to punish with their Brawl composition. After the first point, it was easy going for Falcons. What I want you to take away, especially if you're playing in amateur tournaments and are going to be using this composition or some variant of it, is that fight planning is extremely important, and you can't just throw your ultimates at the opposing team while stacked and expect to win a fight. Yes, you can win some fights this way with brute force, but if you want to play a mirror like this the best, you need to take advantage of angles, and you need to consider angles alongside ultimates when planning fights. I only say this because I know it's a bad habit for amateur teams to just say what ultimates they're going to use when planning a fight without providing more context to their decisions. When planning to use an ultimate, you should have a reason why you're going to use it. You might use May Blizzard to respond to your opponent's rally or annihilation as one example. Always try to have a reason and a mindset behind your ultimates. If you struggle with this, go back into your VODs and think about your ultimate usage more in depth and what you might do differently. You could even watch professional matches, then pause between the fights and actually think about how you would plan a fight if you're a player on one of the teams. There are plenty of ways to practice and think about the game. Alright, that's it for this video. This video was very long and also took a very long time to make. I will admit that I finally managed to burn myself out, and I did take a break last weekend to get outdoors and get my energy back. I'm also trying to reduce my caffeine intake. I drink way too much matcha, and that has seriously affected my energy levels in the afternoon these past few days, but that's only temporary, and I know that reducing caffeine will help my health in the long run, so it's worth the sacrifice of productivity temporarily. I will do my best to get things out a bit faster in the future, but university has been very time consuming and is also kind of kicking my ass with random shifts in my workload. Uni always has to take priority so that I keep my scholarship, so releasing videos bi-weekly rather than every week might be necessary at times depending on the workload. Sorry about the inconsistency, things will be a little rough unless I'm on break from school. I'm not trying to make excuses, just trying to be realistic considering I'm a full-time student. If you want updates on videos, I'd recommend joining the Discord. We have a bunch of cute emotes and stuff, it's pretty cool, and I also try to stream when I can, so make sure to follow me on Twitch. If you want more frequent Ocie content, there's also the second channel, Ocie0. Thanks for watching, thanks for the continued support, and I'll see you a little sooner, hopefully, with the next video.